All right. Well, welcome back to another episode of Revealed Apologetics. I'm your host, Eli Ayala. And today I have joining me my very good friend, Matt Slick of carm.org. That is carm.org, CARM.org, Christian Apologetics Research Ministry. And if you've been living under a rock, you might not be aware of this website, but it is the ultimate mega apologetics website on the internet. It's one of the largest, I think, and probably the oldest. Right when the internet was invented, Carm was right there at the beginning, right? When the
Yeah, back
internet
in the
said,
1700s. Yeah.
that's right. When the internet said, "Let there be light," Carm like pulled the switch. That's how early Carm goes back.
I was
So,
I was actually on before the internet was there. I was on what's called bulletin boards. I actually
hmm,
have some writings still from bulletin boards. You dial up on an old phone, spoof, and then we'd
yeah,
get in, put some message on, and you'd hang up so your wife could use the phone. You come on a few hours later, do the same thing, and then
that's
the
some
internet
old
came out.
That's some old school stuff. Yeah, you've been here for a
That's right.
while, and for folks who might be tuning in that you don't know about Carm, I really do highly recommend you check out that website. It is perfect for a quick reference and an in-depth study, depending on what you're looking for. There's just so many useful articles, and Matt has done an excellent job in simplifying complex issues. So it's perfect for folks who maybe don't have a philosophy degree or seminary degree or anything like that. You can just read it, and he's got Bible references and things like that. And it's been super helpful to me, and I'm sure to thousands and thousands and thousands of others. So, um, thank you for coming on, Matt. I appreciate you coming on and joining me tonight.
Hey man, no problem. Anytime, buddy. Appreciate
Aw-
you.
Awesome. Well, we're going to be jumping right into our topic. I wanted to have Matt on to talk a little bit about apologetics in general and spiritual warfare in particular. And then, even to make that more narrow, I want to talk about the topic of Wicca or witchcraft. Interestingly enough, I used to have a friend who was a Wiccan. She was super nice. We used to have some really great conversations on the college campus and when I was doing community college, and it was really, really interesting. Now, Wicca is definitely not my particular context, normally speaking, but I know that it's something that is pretty big in various circles, and I think it's a topic worthy of discussion. So, without further ado, let's talk about apologetics broadly. I'm going to ask you some apologetics questions, and then we'll kind of contextualize it within the realm of spiritual warfare and Wicca. All right.
I got a sneeze coming on, so keep
That's
going.
okay. Yeah, no worries. No worries. All right. So, apologetics. Well, first, Matt, how long have you been doing apologetics? That's kind of a nice warm up softball question for you.
Since 1980.
1980, before I was born. I was born
Uh-huh.
1982. So, that's a long time.
Yeah, started in 1980, so 43 years. And I started when a friend of mine read me a quote from Joseph Smith, where Joseph
Mm.
Smith boasted he did more than Jesus to keep a church together. It made me angry. I said, "Who said this?" He said, "Joseph Smith." I said, "Who's that?" That's the founder of Mormonism. And I said, "Mormons are Christians, but that guy isn't." And he said, "No, Mormons are not Christians." I said, "What do you mean?" And he explained what they taught. I said,
Mm.
"What?" And that's what got me started studying Mormonism, then Jehovah's Witnesses, then theology, then college, seminary, ministry, blah, 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 internet. Here we are.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I know folks who know you will know more of that backstory. Now, when we're dealing with apologetics and spiritual warfare, a lot of people tend to separate those two because apologetics pertains to the intellect. We're thinking about things, we're dealing with logical arguments and things like that. Is there a connection, as you see it, between doing apologetics, which can be really understood? Wrongly, I think, but can be understood as kind of an intellectual exercise and spiritual warfare. What's the connection, if any, between the two?
Well, everybody, first of all, everybody is apologetics. When you say Jesus is the Savior, that's apologetics. It's a declaration and defense of the truth of who Christ is. And when people say he's God in flesh, that's another form of apologetics. It's just a declaration of truth. So apologetics, it comes from the Greek apologia out of 1 Peter 3:15 to make a defense.
Hmm.
So we defend the Christian faith. And I define apologetics as that branch of Christian theology that deals with the defense and establishment of the Christian faith, not just a defense, but establishing it. So whenever anybody proclaims the gospel, answers a question, they're doing apologetics. Now, there's different levels of apologetics, and you and I do a little more advanced stuff, presuppositional apologetics. We'll do logic things, evidential things, all kinds of stuff. But the average Joe will just give the basics of what he or she's been taught in church, and give an answer, and the basics, and that's fine.
Mm,
But for those of us who are called to a deeper level, not that it's better, it's just deeper. We call to different things in the body of Christ.
okay.
Then we get into it, and I call myself a Christian apologist. Is there a spiritual battle going on with it? Absolutely.
Mm,
Um, uh, Absolutely. Yeah, it can be very difficult. I was given a very strong conversion experience, a very, very strong conversion experience,
sure.
very dramatic, very powerful. And I believe that God gave it to me in order to keep me strong through reading thousands of hours of Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Catholicism, which is bankrupt, Eastern Orthodoxy, Islam, atheism, evolution, UFOs, the occult, Ayalaism, everything, and all the stuff. Incidentally, when I just got back from Israel, Yalla means let's go. So yalla means yes. I just remembered that. It means let's go. We got on the bus, and our tour guide speaks 4 languages. Go yalla, let's go. So we,
Ayalaism for you guys. My last name's Ayala, so apparently I am part of the false religious systems out there. That
yeah, and I said to him, I said, I have a friend back in the States, and his name's Ayala, and I said, I tell him it sounds like a Muslim war cry, and he goes, it does.
actually does.
So,
Actually does. That's
at any
awesome.
rate,
So,
okay,
so you necessarily link spiritual warfare with
absolutely.
apologetics. And I think that's interesting. You speak about the dramatic nature of your conversion and how that equipped you to
Oh
read a
yeah,
lot of just various versions of unbelief. In terms of the attacks of the enemy in doing what you do, can you kind of share what that looked like, what that looks like in general, in terms of how it continues to manifest?
sure, sure. I used to be young and handsome, and look what it's done to me. That's one thing. But let me give you a story. We're talking about Wicca tonight. Years and years ago, I wrote Wicca stuff on my website, and this is the
Mm,
truth. I'm making any of this up. So I ordered a bunch of books, and maybe $150 worth of books from Wicca sources. And I waited, and boom, they all kind of got there in one big package, one or two, three packages in the same day. And I received these books. Now these books are full of stuff on the occult. It's ultimately demonic, spells, seances, covens, worship, uh, incantations, full of all this kind of stuff. But I know there's demonic activity associated with it. So what I did was I laid hands on the boxes and I prayed over the books,
mm,
and I asked Jesus to bind it. That night, I had one of the most terrifying nightmares I'd had in decades, and I mean terrifying. I can still remember waking up, the kind of nightmare where you're gasping for air, and it takes you half a minute before you kind of realize
mm.
it was just a dream. It was one of those. And I looked over at those books and I said, "That's why." And 2 days later, I'm driving down the freeway, and my right rear tire blew, and I mean blew, as in the tread shredded and slapped up underneath the wheel well. Well, that can scare the bejeebers out of you, so you jerk your car, and that's potentially very dangerous. But I survived that. 2 days after that, I was on the Boise River. I don't talk about this very often, but I'm a very good swimmer. I've been swimming since I was 4 or 5 years old. My
Mhm.
mom and dad wanted me to do swim to Catalina Island, like a 27-mile thing out in the ocean. I just love water. I'm very comfortable in it, and I'm a good swimmer. The reason I'm bragging like that is because I'm out on the Boise River. The Boise River has about a 3 mile an hour current, and that's about 3 feet deep.
Okay.
I don't need a life vest. I'm on the back of the raft. There's two rafts, two families were, and I'm doing the macho dad thing, and I'm just staring in the whole bit. The Boise River. Okay, the people on little tube rafts and things like that, and like, hey, look, there goes a branch. And it's pretty dangerous, right? You're going,
Okay.
so it's pretty, it's nothing, and so we're going, and of all the things to happen, the raft went over a little area of rocks that was only this tall in the water. okay, this
Mm,
tall, maybe 2 or 3 inches, and for about this long, maybe a couple of feet. And the water just went down like this over it.
mm,
For some reason, I got launched out of this raft and landed on some rocks on my left side,
mm.
broke some ribs. My wrist was sprained. We almost ended up going to emergency.
Okay.
And I could not paddle anymore. Uh, I had to swim in the water and get back in, which was extremely painful. Long story short, it took 2 months to heal. So this all occurred within a week of getting those books. And I'm not saying it's because of those books, but I'm going to tell you something. When you do apologetics, you dive. The closer you get into the actual occult stuff,
Hmm.
the more dangerous it becomes. If you're talking about an argument from a syllogistic thing an atheist gives why God doesn't exist, you're typing out a response. That's one thing. You get books on the occult and on say, which ultimately is Satanism, and you're doing all this stuff, and you're diving in and you're publishing what it is and how to refute it with Scripture. Just be ready. And so that's just one of the things that's happened.
Mm. Now, you mentioned the occult. When we deal with the cults, oftentimes people can get confused between the difference between a cult and the occult.
Mhm.
Can you define both of those categories and kind of help people understand what the difference is between cults and the occult?
Sure, a cult, generically speaking, can be a group of individuals that follow a specific leader or theological perspective.
Mm,
Many cults use the Bible and many cults don't. There's usually a kind of leadership submission you have to be part of. And then there's often things like love bombing, of shunning, various things that work inside of cults and
mm.
the aberrant teaching, and then the leaders get control of your lives. The occult isn't like that. The occult is the occult means hidden. It deals with the hidden things. And I used to be involved in the occult before I became a Christian. As
Okay.
seances, I've seen stuff. And so you aren't in a group of a specific leader, but you're in a group seeking the same thing, which is power and influence achieved through communication with the spiritual realm. And the means of communication can be seances, necromancy, table tilting, oral astral projection, aura visualizations,
Mm,
energy balancing, chakra balancing, focusing on an object, emptying your mind, waiting for spirits, mediumship, etc. These are the kinds of things that open you up to direct demonic oppression, where
sure.
cults, it's not necessarily direct demonic, it's usually a psychological manipulation and stuff like that.
Okay. Now, when we talk about Wicca more specifically, is that in the category of a cult or is that in the category of the occult?
It's more in the occult. Now, all things in the occult have some form usually of cult stuff in them, and they
Mm,
can kind of overlap. But mostly, just think of paganism and witchcraft. That's what Wicca is. And when I've written about it, Wiccans have emailed me and said that is not true.
mm,
And I say, yes, it is true. And they say, no, it's not. We're not practicing witchcraft. I say, yes, you are, according to what the Bible says.
right.
So we have these things. They don't want to be associated a lot of times with witchcraft, but it is. It's a form of witchcraft and necromancy, contacting the dead, spirits. So basically, in Wicca, there's the idea of male, female, and gods and goddesses. I've literally asked Wiccans the questions, well, what gods do you serve? Well, and they'll tell me. And I know what questions to ask. I'm getting someplace. I say, and how many gods are there? Well, I don't know. There's many, many, many gods. And
Mm,
so why do you serve these? For whatever ones they say. Oh, because I like this and this and this. And so they pick out of a pantheon of gods and goddesses the kinds of god and goddesses that serve their own needs.
mm. So
And I've
Wicca is a religion of preferences.
yes, it's
Mm,
subjectivism. I've even had one Wiccan tell me, this is one time, oh, I made up a god to
mm,
serve. I thought, what? How do you know it's real? I just believe it's real.
yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, we didn't define what Wicca is. We kind of touched on some stuff, and I'd like you, if you can define what Wicca is, kind of a definition. And I don't know what you have on your end, but I'm on your website here. You have a whole section. I actually put the link in the comments there, so folks can check it out. Matt's got an entire section on Wicca and their beliefs. But I would like to go through some of these affirmations. You have a list of affirmations and denials, and I'd like to see if you can kind of unpack some of the basics there. And
Sure.
but if you have other stuff you prepared that you wanted to cover, we can kind of transition to that. That's perfectly fine. But before I do that, I want to remind people, if you have any questions, you can put them in the comments and preface your question with question, and we'll try our best to get to some of them. So you can keep them. We'll kind of chill out here. It's nothing crazy. You can, if you have a question about precept or anything else or theology, I'll just throw them over to Matt. I'm just kidding. We can ask either of us questions if you'd like, and I'll try my best to get to them. We can address them. So definitely do that if you have a question or a comment or anything along those lines. All right. So I'm here on your site. Here are some affirmations. So you have here, it says most Wiccans hold the following list of affirmations and denials, but because there are differences among Wiccan tradition, not every Wiccan will affirm or deny every statement listed here. Nevertheless, the list is accepted by by almost all Wiccans. So the first point you have here in affirmations is Wiccans typically affirm the existence of a supreme divine power known as the One or the All. Can you unpack that for us? What does that even mean? It sounds very, very vague.
Well, from what I gathered from it, it's just basically a form of pantheism, where God is a personal kind of a being intertwined with existence and nature. They call it the one and the all, the source of all things.
Mm,
When I asked them more about what it is, they really don't have much of it answers. And since there are different fields of different types of Wicca, like 1734 Wicca, it's not a year, it's a code that deals with a goddess.
mm,
I don't know the code, I don't understand it, but anyway, that's what it is. Alexandrian, Celtic or Celtic, Dianic, Eclectic, Gardnerian, Georgian, and Solitary. So these are the main ones of Wicca, and they have variations within them. But we could talk about the general commonalities. So generally, they will accept the all, but not necessarily every individual within there. Some
okay.
might say there's a plethora of gods, which you and I could rip to shreds, dealing with presuppositions and how do you have
Sure.
logic and transcendentals and things like that. But mostly, when you use stuff like that against people like that, you have to train them logically in order for them to see how bad it is. So you're really pushing two rocks uphill.
Sure.
And so, from this thing they call the all is a derivation of the gods and goddesses, the male and female essence, which is manifested in the physical realm. But there's a male and female quality in the in in the ethereal realm,
Hmm.
which you'd think that the transgenders are in contact with.
Sure. Now, so it says here the existence of a supreme divine power known as the One or the All. Are Wiccans pantheistic?
Hmm. Yeah, from what I understand, there is pantheistic, but pantheism lends itself to the idea of an impersonal God.
Mm,
Some do. But let's just say that the universe is part of God, but God is personal, and yet you say, well, is the universe eternal? Some say yes, some say no. Well, how can it be
okay.
eternal if it's God's, you know, or how can it not be eternal? It came into existence. Well, God, and it's really tough to nail down any
Mm,
coherent system. I did a lot of research with Wiccans and talking to them, and let me just tell you, from what I remember, you could not get an exact series of things. Like you and I are Calvinists. Let's go 5 points. We'll break the 5 points up into
sure.
five subpoints each, and we'll show you from the scripture. Here's exactly what this is, not that. You can't do that with them. You have to
Okay.
be very general and iffy as you're talking to them. This is why I recommend that if anybody here talks to a Wiccan, don't get all aggressive. Just ask them. Well, can you please tell me what that is?
Sure.
What form do you hold to? And then ask, what do you believe about God? And ask questions about it, God. Personal, impersonal, male, female. You'll know that there could be personal God, of course. Male, female. Do you worship one or many? Why? You just ask all these things, and sometimes it's necessary to do that for quite a while before you can get any crowbar, any crack to see where you can start crowbarring some
Mm,
stuff
yeah.
apart.
So
Yeah,
you want to do some reconnaissance, so to speak, and just ask questions so that you can kind of get
right.
a point of contact to kind of a springboard, so to speak, to kind of then begin to critique and show the errors in the position.
Yeah, I should have said it that way.
Yeah. Well, you have something interesting here. It says here on the list of affirmations that from the all came the god and goddess.
Hmm.
So if the all is what you said it is the all something that creates other divine beings? How does that work if they're pantheistic? My understanding of pantheism is that all is God and God is all. So how do they make sense of the distinctions between different gods and goddesses? But then you have the all, but pantheism's the case. So everything is divine. So you know what I'm saying? So pantheism is a form of metaphysical monism in terms of which the fundamental essence of reality is this ultimate one. So how do they make sense out of distinctions in their kind of pantheon, so to speak?
Well, your obvious problem is you're thinking critically and logically. And so, therefore, when you ask questions like that of Wiccans, you might get Bob who says, well, it's because of the panentheistic aspect of the impersonal that has manifested through the Gnostic sub-levels that we adopted through the Gnostic goddess, blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. You might ask another person who goes, I never thought of that.
Mm,
And you'll get a full range of stuff in between. So
okay.
think of them as New Agers, except they're more into witchcraft and nature worship. Nature, they so where the New Age believes in nature worship, the divine pantheism. God is all, we're all one, and we're all part of the creation.
Mhm.
Wicca is more narrowed in that it wants to be able to have sorcery. Uh, when I say things, I got to balance it: sorcery, but not hurt anybody; to control, but not negatively influence. Well, how do
Mm.
they define those things? So what they try and do, Wiccans, what Wiccans try and do is be free to do whatever they want without injuring anybody.
That's wrapped up in the Wiccan Rede, am I correct?
Right,
And what
right.
is the Wiccan Rede? So
That's
folks know what that is.
what was that? It was do as ye will, yet harm none. I think it is.
Mm,
Yeah,
okay. Now that's interesting. So do as you will, yet harm none. I'm under the impression, and of course, again, it depends who you're asking, but is it the position, generally speaking, for those who hold to the Wiccan Rede, that there is also a denial of moral absolutes?
yeah, there is.
Okay.
Because if there's a moral, because people actually think these things through a little bit.
Mhm.
If there are moral absolutes, it implies a moral absolute lawgiver. If there's moral
Right.
absolute lawgiver, then there's righteousness and judgment, and they don't like that kind of a thing.
Okay.
So they stay away from that. So they do have the basic adopted philosophical position is you can do witchcraft. They don't call it that. You can do seances. Um, have you seen that the series? My wife and daughters love it. When the girl goes back in time because she goes to that altar thing in Scotland or whatever it was,
No, not familiar with
and
that.
he goes back, she goes back to like 200 years and
Okay.
romance and all this stuff, and it's one of those things where they do a lot of talking. It's a girl thing. They do a lot of talking
Excuse
over
me, I
here,
have
then
a
talking
question.
over there.
When do the aliens come out again? I there are no aliens. No, thank
No
you.
aliens,
Hard
right?
pass.
Right. But no, but it's a good series too, and there's some actual action. But nevertheless, so it's the idea is that in Wicca you perform ceremonies that are uh, this is what doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
Is the Wiccans know that it was started about 100 years or so ago, give or take 30 years, kind of a thing, back in the first half of the 1900s in England, and it was started by different people, kind of a simultaneous thing. But there's some main guys and they were involved with witches at the time. Well, then what they did was they have Gardnerian Wicca. Then
Okay.
they have esoteric Wicca. They have what is it? Alexandrian Wicca. And so, but I've actually talked to them. I said, no, wait a minute. So you admit then that this developed in like 1960, this
Mm,
particular view by this one guy or this one girl? Yes. Well, how do you know that it's true? They just kind of made it go, made it up. I
mhm,
don't want to be offensive, made it up. Well, we just, they were just in tune with nature, and they had a better uh, sense of the priestess, and so they were able to get in tune with this and developed it, and so we followed that style.
mm,
It's just,
interesting.
you know, it's like I got some swampland I want to tell you about.
All right, so you have here. Let's continue on here. It's interesting. Point four in affirmations. It has here that Wiccans affirm that the god and goddesses are manifested in various forms in the universe. What does that mean? In what forms do they manifest? I don't even know what that means.
In the spiritual realm, you have different gods and goddesses, names of the gods and names of the goddesses, and these individual gods and goddesses have certain abilities that you can, by seancing, by let's see, by the sorcery methodologies, let's just use a broad sense,
Okay.
you can contact them and get their assistance.
Okay.
To, yeah, they want power. Remember, people in the occult want power and influence. That's what
Mm,
it is, power and influence.
interesting. Now, let's see here. Let's try to take a look at. w- I was trying to. I wanted to entitle this episode "Wiccan's Precept." So let's talk a little bit about. Okay, so we have some worldview outlines. I would imagine again it would depend on who you're speaking to, but I would imagine that Wicca, as a philosophical system, as well as a religious system, has an epistemology.
I don't know what that epistemology would be, except to say that it's based on your personal preferences and subjective experience.
Mm. And so
That's it.
if you're asking what a Wiccan's epistemology is, it's going to be dependent on the particular Wiccan that you're asking. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Let's just say that
Yeah.
you and I we're going to go to a Wicca meeting, and it was all
Mhm.
friendly. They knew we were Christians, and they're going to let us come in and ask questions.
Okay.
And try and debate with them. Let's just say it's gonna be a friendly affair. If I was in the car, I'd be going, okay, look, dude, we got to ask a lot of questions first. You got to find out what they believe because you don't know what this particular group may be. If they say they're Alexandrian Wiccans, well, then it'll narrow it down. But then you still got to ask questions. So
Sure.
the first thing we would do, like we would do with anybody, what's your worldview? What's your particulars? And we're not going to say those necessarily words, but we're going to do that. And you have to do
But
that with the Wiccans. Absolutely, you have to.
mm,
Absolutely.
it's interesting. So you also have here that they affirm that different paths to spirituality are acceptable as long as they don't hurt anyone.
Right.
What does that mean? What is the kind of the broad range of things that are acceptable to a Wiccan as being a valid path to the truth? I mean, I would imagine that wouldn't include Christianity, right?
Oh no, Christianity is not a valid path to them because,
So there are many valid paths, but Christianity is not one of them from a
right,
Wiccan perspective.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. They'll
And so what
say
kind of
many will say, well, if that's your view, it's okay for you. But then when you say, but my view says your view is wrong, well, that
Right.
can't be true. So yeah,
So what are some of the other things that Wiccans would say are consistent as being valid paths to the truth?
your preferences, your desires. Wicca, think of Wicca as a relativistic, feelings-based system that where people who have similar ideologies about their feelings about nature, about power, about knowledge, they kind of meet.
Mm,
And they as there's a billion people or a million people in an environment, a certain percentage are going to believe this narrow kind of a thing, and another this narrow. So what happens is they find those paths.
sure.
Wicca is very subjective. There are uh, there are divisions within Wicca, but it's very subjective inside of it. My experience talking to Wiccans has been that you really have to analyze and ask questions and take notes on individuals, and it may not be what the person next to you says. And I've had that experience where I've been in a room with Wiccans where they disagree with each other. And
Right.
like, you know,
I think you're gonna get a kick out of this. So you said something like they're relativistic. So someone says my truth is your truth, and so humbled clay says so they're Democrats.
yeah,
So a Wiccan is just a religious Democrat.
that's right. Well, let me just play off of that a little bit.
That's
It,
hilarious.
one of the discussions we might have is the occult practices that are apparently being done by a lot of people on the upper levels of government that
Okay.
have been involved with Freemasonry. There's a lot of stuff coming out, but it's under wraps, but it's there,
Mm,
surfacing, bubbling under the surface. But
yeah.
that's another topic.
Oh, that's interesting. I love the comments here. That stuff like that makes me smile. If you see me laughing, it's not necessarily because you said so. It's just something funny going on
Yeah, no
in the
problem.
comments there. All right. So I know that when I first came in contact with Wicca, just as an idea, I often equated it with Satanism, which is also considered an official recognized religion. But as I've read some of your stuff, I've learned that they're not the same. Can you tell us the difference between
Okay.
Satanism and Wicca and why they're not considered in the same category, although they're probably both included under the umbrella of the occult, right?
Right.
So they're
Right.
both the occult, but they're not the same
Right.
category under that broader umbrella. So what is the difference between Wicca and Satanism?
Well, Satanism has its variations as well. In some
Mhm.
satanic groups, they actually worship the devil Satan. Other Satanists don't believe he exists, but they worship flesh, pleasure,
Mm,
and things like that. So there's variations within that realm. All right. So if we were to just focus mainly on the idea of focusing on a negative entity and a very, very solidified, codified, centralized negative evil,
okay.
Wiccans would deny that. They would say that there are negatives in the world, but not such a concentrated evil like that. So they would not serve and worship such an evil person like that, an
Okay.
evil being. Hold on.
So are you saying that some Satanists will worship the Satan of Scripture, not
Oh
just
yeah,
some?
oh yeah,
Okay. So the
yeah.
one, so the one in the Bible, not like this. They
Right.
believe
Some
there's
Satanists
this
do. Right.
entity they call Satan. It's the specific one that is in Scripture.
Right. Yep.
Interesting. Okay.
Sorry, my
That's a
cat
big
down.
cat, man.
Yeah, he's
You look like a evil mastermind in a James Bond movie.
yeah, he's a purebred Maine Coon from Russia.
That's
Anyway,
awesome.
another topic. So you're right, and so the Wiccans don't want to be associated with a deliberate evil because their read is do as you will, but harm none.
Okay.
So you don't want to serve the evil one because that can be negative. That's serving and focusing on negativity and power in control of others because some versions of Satanism are just flat out evil and
Okay.
demonic possession, sacrifices, breeding women to go in and seduce pastors, child molestation. I mean, we're talking evil. Then there's other where they say they don't believe in any of that, but they just want to gain spiritual power and they want to influence people to do what they want to do.
Hmm.
And so Wicca would say, no, we don't want to do either one of those. They want to help people. They want to be good. It's just another form of demonic crap. Sorry,
Sure.
that's what it is. Because, oh, well, then you can just not believe in Jesus. You can believe in helping people by using the same demonic forces who then imitate. And there are Wiccans who say they've actually seen manifestations. They'll be out in a forest, they'll do some circle worship thing, and all of a sudden there's a manifestation of something. See, that's one of the
Hmm.
goddesses of whatever that's manifested. So yeah, they are very deceived.
Interesting. Now, I think a lot of people often will confuse Wicca and New Age philosophy.
Right.
What's the difference between New Age and a Wiccan perspective?
New Age is New Age is a much more broad system of belief where you are divine in your nature and you get in tune with a divine consciousness or consciousnesses
Okay.
in the universe and you can create your own reality by harmonization with that new principle, that divine principle of which we are all part of. Where
Okay.
Wicca says we're separate from creation, but they worship creation, where New Age will worship creation, but not the way Wiccans do.
Mm,
So New Age will say, yeah, the divine aspect, and they believe in that. God, some New Age might say that it might be pantheistic, some panentheistic. Some say God just indwells the universe, he's separate from it. Some say that, and it gets into things, and you have variations like that in Wicca. So it's hard to separate, except that you could think of if you think of Wicca as New Age, and then Wicca is a subcategory of New Age where they have uh, specific ceremonies, specific incantations, specific
mm.
spells that they do in order to gain power and influence, where generally speaking, the New Agers don't, because you're already in contact with the divine substance, where the
Okay.
Wiccans want to get in contact with it through methods and things like this, a lot more defined.
Mm.
than the New Age would.
Now, is
That's
Wicca is New Age pantheistic as well as Wicca? Is that a feature they both share?
oh yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay.
Now remember, when I say this, I keep requalifying what I'm saying
Okay.
because I'm straining because yes, New Agers are pantheistic mostly. Like I'm telling you, man, if like say that on the East Coast there was a New Age convention that's going to go on for a week, I'd fly out and
Mhm.
you and I would go spend 2 days there.
Right.
And you would just absolutely love it because you won't be able to believe what you see at a
Sure.
New Age convention. But the Wiccans, they don't have, as far as I'm aware of, conventions. They have smaller meetings of people who are dedicated and have been initiated into their group. And so they have initiation steps where the New Agers don't.
Mhm. Now, what do those steps look like? How does one get initiated into, you said the New Age has an initiation or Wicca
Yeah,
hasn't?
Wicca. I'm not really familiar with the
There's no
steps.
altar call, you know? Come just as you are. Got it.
Well, they would have an altar call because they
Okay.
would have an altar. And then they'll often do things where nudity is involved. Sometimes they don't. So
Okay.
I see. This is why I have to say some yes, some no. It's why I'm speaking so generically, and I'm trying to represent both sides accurately, but
Sure.
Wicca accurately. So there are instances where some Wiccan sects will have nudity and some will have what I understand sexual things going on where others don't.
Sure.
Some will have ceremonies that you have to participate in. Some, I think there's even some bloodletting in a couple of them, but I can't remember for sure. And there's others where there's ceremonies where you have to lay down on an altar and ceremonially die. They don't
Mm.
kill anybody, don't hurt anybody. They'll go through the procedures. It's a like a baptism thing that we go through. Well,
Sure.
they'll have an initiation, right? And you do it with other people, and then you're admitted into that group under that particular. It's called a coven too. They call them covens, just
Mhm.
like in witchcraft, they're covens. I mean, in
Yeah.
Satanism, they're covens too, but they borrow the words and play with them. It's a tough thing to weave through all the differences and try
Sure.
and make it make sense.
Sure. And that's why asking questions is so important. When I think of witches, I often think of women, and that's not necessarily the case, right? In terms of population,
Hillary,
I mean, I'm sure you probably don't know this
Pelosi,
off the top of your head, but are most people who practice Wicca men or women?
mostly are women that I've my experience has
Okay.
mostly women. There are men warlocks, but uh, mostly they're women.
Okay.
Mhm.
And now, in your opinion, why do you think people are attracted to this sort of stuff? I mean, when you think of like I'm a witch. It's almost like a joke since it's become so popular in like pop culture, witches, and you have things like Harry Potter and the Wizard of Oz, and you think of a witch being green with a long nose flying on a broomstick. I mean, it kind of sounds like you've joined an Easter bunny cult. It doesn't look like it's something that someone would take seriously. Why are people attracted to this? Number one. And what sorts of people are attracted? Is it the younger? Is it the older? What does that look like? How do you understand that?
Well, I can't speak for how people feel,
Okay.
but I have talked to different people over the years, and not so much in the past few years about Wicca. They kind of keep to themselves.
Okay.
But I can tell you what caused me to get involved in the occult, and I was heavily involved,
Now,
and I
before you
was.
before you answer that, then you just because you said
Okay.
that, someone gave a super chat, and it's appropriate because what they're asking is related to what you were about to get into. First, I'd like to thank Alex for his $4.99 super chat. Thank you so much. Super chats are super helpful, so I appreciate it. But Alex says
Oh,
here,
Alex.
Alex, Matt, you should tell
Hey,
some.
Alex, what does baptism mean? That's
Uh
an
oh.
inside joke. Go
There's
ahead.
okay. Alex says, Matt, you should tell some of your spiritual warfare stories, the ones you told me when I was visiting. It will shine a light on what we are against. Why don't you do that? Because you were talking about what got you into the occult. Why don't you expand on that and then maybe tell us some stories from your own experience of some of the spiritual warfare issues that you've dealt with while you've been in ministry dealing with the cults and the occult?
Well, let's see. It's your show. I don't want to dominate too much.
Sure.
Uh,
Well, you're my
but,
guest. You could do whatever you'd say, whatever you'd like.
well, there's been things I want to get off my chest about you. Uh,
Don't be jealous of my perfect Hispanic tan
you do have
and
a
the
good
fact that I'm
Hispanic
40,
tan.
but I look like I'm 25.
So I'll try and give the short version of things.
Okay.
Before I was born, my mom, who's very intelligent, would start having these dreams of a man coming to her in her sleep, and he had a black hat on, a long sleeve white shirt rolled up to his elbows, black slacks, black shoes, and she would it'd be in a dream, and he would walk towards her, it would terrify her, and she would wake up and she would watch him walk through the wall and stare at her at the bed. And this went on for 2 years, and my
Walk
dad was
through the wall?
walk through the wall. She'd watch him. I watch the wall, and then he would just appear through the wall. I mean, I asked her about it. Her IQ was genius. She could read 1,000 words a minute at 80% comprehension, no joke.
Okay.
And she's a lot smarter than I am. And so I said, "Mom, were you on drugs? Were you on medication? Were you on, the birth this or that?" Or I went through a whole bunch of stuff. She said, "No, no, no." And she said it happened numerous times over 2 years. My dad was in the service, so they moved different places. So I'm convinced, and I became convinced that she was seeing something legitimate. Okay, once and twice, maybe bad pizza, but it went
Matt,
on numerous times.
is this a dream or something she claims to have seen?
She would dream it, wake up, and watch him come through the wall. So
Okay.
she'd be conscious when she would see him.
Sure.
My dad could not see him, and she would wake him up, and he'd say, "Is he here again?" "Yes." "Go turn the light on." He'd walk, turn the light on, he'd disappear. So a couple of times he said he'd walk right through where he was. Walk through. All right, so then I was born, and I'm the firstborn male in my family, and she has a dream. Here he comes again. This is the background to lead up to something. And so he comes again, and she wakes up, and he walks over to where I was in the crib, and I was in the room there with him, and standing half in the wall. She wakes up my dad, and I said, "What's he doing?" She says, "He's looking at Matthew." She always called me Matthew.
Mhm.
And looking at Matthew, "What's he doing?" "Just staring. He's standing part in the wall and part out of the wall, just watching him." "Well, go turn the light on." She did. He turned the light on. He stops coming after that.
Mm.
That's a freaky. Why? Why? I don't
Yeah,
know.
just a little
All
bit,
right.
right?
Yeah. So I didn't tell this to my friends. I wasn't sure what to say, and wasn't real sure about a lot of things. And a buddy of mine, who I still know, I've known him for over 50 years now. We were involved in the occult together because his mom was. And long story short, so anyway, I would try astral projection. I couldn't quite do it. I could get close. I could see auras. I've
Mhm.
heard voices. I'll tell you what, a manifestation that we both saw at the same time. I had some buddies, we would do things, and we would see lights move, and we could feel things touch. And I had an experience once where I was actually touched by something demonic, and with my not a roommate of mine who was, and I
Okay.
could tell you stuff. But anyway, so I said to my friend Dave, I said, "Dave, I don't believe this astral projecting thing's working very well," and he said, "Well, I do it all the time." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. We're going to high school, and we lived across the street. And I said, I'm going to put some stuff on my desk in my room tonight. You tell me what it is on the way to school tomorrow." And some obscure things. He's not going to guess them, like 4 or 5 things. And I put them in a pattern. Next day, so what'd you find? Nothing. Uh huh. Why not? And he said, "Well, I was coming across the street, and astral projecting, and there was a man there." I said, "What?" "Yeah, a man dressed he had a black hat, black slacks, black shoes. He had a white long sleeve shirt rolled up to his elbows. He wouldn't let me come in."
Mm.
And I'd never told him. So I remember where I was, and I was in high school, and I'm 66 now. I can still tell you exactly what I saw. It
Yeah.
stuck, it was a cement. I was riding a bike, and I could still see the sidewalk. So that's just that. He and I were in a room once trying to contact the dead, and I saw, I'm telling you, no drugs. I've never done drugs in my life. And I didn't drink till I was in my late 20s because my dad was an
Okay.
alcoholic, and he beat that. That's another story. And so uh, I can still see it. This blue ball of light just started
Mm.
materializing. It's about this big.
The lights
And
were on or the lights are
no,
off?
we're in the dark. That's enough light
Okay.
coming from outside in the darkness to, you can see around. And it was to our left. He was to my left, so I saw his head look at the same direction I was looking. So
Mhm.
I knew he was seeing the same thing. and this blue ball of light was on the ground, and it started to elongate and become longer and taller. And as it did, it took the shape of a masculine kind of a figure with
Hmm.
large shoulders, and it had a cape, the kind of cape that Sherlock Holmes would wear,
Hmm.
with the ruffles in the back down by the shoulder blades. And then it stood up, and as it stood up, it turned to face us and dissolved into nothing. And in place of it, a yellow cross materialized. And the yellow cross is about this big, and it's about a foot and a half. And like this, I remember I still see it, yellow, just glowing yellow, just undulating yellow, and this blue aura of the same color as that blue, just,
Hmm.
just, just moving, just around. It was beautiful. It really
For
was.
how long?
Well, not very long, because it was in front of, it was over there, and it didn't accelerate. It just was moving, and then just stopped right in front of us.
Okay.
And I could still see where, it probably went on for 20, 30 seconds till we ran out of there.
So for someone's like, oh, you're just probably hallucinating or seeing something. It was there long enough and sustained that you were thinking like, okay, I'm actually seeing this right now.
You know,
And there 30 seconds ish. I know you didn't have a stopwatch, but it's a fairly long amount of time. It's not
that's
like
just
you
from the
just saw,
cross. Yeah,
right. It's not like you see like a passing shadow and you're like, wait, what was that?
yeah.
It's kind of something sustained and you're kind of seeing, and what happened after that? You guys, I mean,
We split.
how does one respond when you see something like that? You're kind of just shocked. I mean,
We were getting
what
scared.
happened after that?
We were starting to realize that more and more things were starting to happen. One
Okay.
night I was in my room going to sleep, and I heard a female voice, external. I heard it in the room call my name
Hmm.
and I was able to locate it. It was up in the ceiling area, and I heard it. It wasn't me hallucinating. It wasn't drugs. It wasn't anything. It was I'm sitting there going to sleep, and I went and I heard it, Matthew. When someone's in a room and calls your name, you know where it's coming from,
Right.
and that's what it was. And
Did it sound like a creepy voice or just a woman's voice?
woman's voice calling my name in the middle of the, well, not middle of the ceiling, but I can tell you, it's just that way and up.
Yeah.
And then I was with my buds, and we would do occult crap. And but things are weird, because I was on the floor in this one guy's house, and we had my three friends were around. Dave was one of them, and some other guys, and we would do all this stuff every now and then. Huh, so stupid. And we would. I'm not gonna tell you how to do this, but we were
Sure.
quiet, and I'm waiting for them to say something, and we all kind of wait in case someone else is seeing something. So sometimes we just wait, and nothing's happening for 20 minutes. And I finally said, "Is anybody seeing anything?" And they all went, "Shh!" All of them, quiet. And I said, "What?" And they said, "It's over you, Matt." I said, "What?" "I don't see anything." And
Mhm.
um, they said, "The lights." I couldn't see them. They're like arm's length. If I was on my back, just I put my arm straight up, that's where they were. And I said, "I can't see them." And they said,
Mhm.
"We all see them." Don't know what that was. I'll tell you one more story.
Sure.
After I was a Christian, I was in Anaheim.
But by the way, I'm gonna have to go to sleep tonight with my MacArthur Study Bible, not just any old Bible with notes in it, so that I could quote the scriptures and the interpretations.
Yeah, yeah, I would cuddle it if I were you.
That's right. I got my ESV. I got my Reformation Study Bible.
Hmm.
Hopefully, the demonic will be scared of one of those. I don't know what's
Yeah.
going on, but
Put some tracks in your pajama pockets. Yeah,
that's right. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting you there.
it's all right. So I'm with another a guy I know named another Dave, different
Mm,
Dave this time, and we're roommates. And I did swap meet ministry with him. And anyway, we're still friends. He's on the board of directors, and so we're at the Anaheim Convention Center, which is across the street from Disneyland in Southern California. In Anaheim, we used to live in the area, and so there was a Buddhist convention. And so the Anaheim Convention Center is shaped in a kind of an oval. And on the front third or front third are all the Buddhists, and they're chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. They're chanting it. And Dave and I are the only ones, and the whole other half. And we're
mm,
sitting in the second level, and our second, I think we're up a little bit high. I think it was the second level, or there's a second level. It doesn't matter. We're up high because looking down on them. And we're sitting there, and I'm sitting like this. I'm just sitting there. My arms are in my on the chair, on the chair arms, right? That I'm just sitting here, and Dave's to my right. Uh, um, I think there's a chair between us because we're not going to sit together. We're guys, and so there's a chair in between us. And they're chanting, and they're chanting, and what they're doing is summoning demons, but they don't realize that.
Sure.
And we're watching, and we're watching, and no lie, I started feeling on my forearms, started feeling tingling, just tingling. And I thought, okay, I'm just getting a little psyched, no big deal.
Sure.
And I started feeling more. I didn't say anything to Dave. And this is true. I'm sitting there going, that feels funny. I looked down at my arms, and it felt like someone had put fingers on my arms like this and were pressing down. It felt like fingers.
Mm,
I could feel the separation of forces, like I could
right.
feel it was pressing me down, both arms. I thought that's weird. And I turned to Dave, and I remember I was going to ask him one thing, and right before I did, I didn't ask him. Instead, I said, "Do you feel anything?" And he said to me, "You mean like hands holding your arms down?"
Mm.
I said, "Yes." He said, "We need to leave." I says, "Yep." And we got out of there.
Now, this was before you were a Christian
No, I was a Christian then.
at this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Interesting.
Yep.
Now, let's talk about some apologetic application here, and then we'll kind of take some questions. Here are some questions that are in the chat here, and I'd like to get to some of them. From an apologetics perspective, I mean, yes, we're in spiritual warfare, so prayer obviously is going to be a key point of the Christian life in general. More
Yeah.
specifically, if you're in the realm of apologetics, you especially need prayer, right? But in terms of just interacting with some of these people, I mean, have you interacted with these people in an apologetics context? What did that look like? What sort of questions do you ask? How might you help folks who are listening in learn how to engage people like this? Because there's kind of a boogeyman mentality, right? Like, oh, those are the evil people, the people in contact with with the devil and all these sorts of things, and we can kind of look at them in a not a very accurate way because we shouldn't walk in fear. But how can we navigate apologetic discussions with such people?
Prayerfully. So if you are going to talk to someone directly involved in the occult,
Mm,
then you need to be prayed up and you need to be ready for spiritual attack.
okay.
If you're not up to that, don't get involved. Period. Just don't do it. It's different. When you're in Wicca is more occultic than the New Age, and Hinduism is like New Age light with some theology behind it.
Mm,
But if you're going to talk to people, and then there's Spiritism, which we haven't talked about, but Spiritism is on the rise. And there's like I think the last count 70 million Spiritists in the world.
wow.
Now I need to talk about what a door is. A door is a portal that is between the spiritual and the physical. The portal can be real, as in you can see it open up like like, and something steps through. It's I don't know if anybody's ever seen that,
Mhm.
but mainly what we understand it to be is a doorway that's opened. Now, in my novel, The Influence, I use that concept and have a demonic force sent from the abyss that comes in, and there's a rip in space, and it comes tumbling out, and this thing closes behind it.
Sure.
That's just for writing, but doors can be opened by having occult things in your house, Ouija boards, tarot cards. Now, what do you do if you have a satanic Bible? What do you do if you have a Book of Mormon? What do you do if you have the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society or the Quran? These things are obviously all occultic. So what you do is you pray over these things and you try and bind them in the name of Jesus Christ. You don't pray to the devil. Devil, I rebuke you. Don't do that. You pray to the Lord Jesus Christ. You ask him to rebuke and you do all that kind of stuff.
Mm,
And so it's very important. But doors can be maintained by people not in your house.
Okay.
So someone could give you a gift that they have specifically prayed over in an occult sense to try and get you to be involved in their system.
Okay.
And so someone could give you a gift, say it's a crystal, it's a rock, oh, it might be whatever. You don't know, or it could be a book on Wicca, it could be a book on whatever. And people could go through ceremonies and they can anoint that an object and then transfer it to you, and it's a door. Now I could get into some weird stuff here, okay? And I don't know how much to do because they'll go, Matt, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
All right. They
I'll,
say you're crazy anyway, so might
they
as
say
well.
I'm crazy. No, they say crazier.
That's right.
But years ago here, my daughters were seeing some guys as friends, and some of them were involved in some bad stuff.
Okay.
And one of them was a Christian, though, who said he could see things, right or wrong, or real or not. But he said he could see there were things trying to get into our house, but couldn't. And then about a year later, one of my daughters, saw something in the hallway here and saw a figure. And, she's not the kind of person who, just made it up. I mean, she goes, Dad, I saw this. And I quizzed her. I said, what was it? It was a shadowy figure. And that's consistent with something somebody else said is trying to get into the house. So having seen stuff myself, and even a lot of Calvinists will say, you never saw it. Um, I took it seriously. I had my wife take the kids, go see a movie, go get ice cream, whatever. I said, be gone for an hour, okay? And I took oil and I went through every single room in the house, every single room. I touched every wall of every room, bathrooms, closets, every wall, and objects. And I would just ceremonially go through and do this. And I prayed out loud to my Lord and my Savior Jesus, binding stuff. I repeat myself a lot. This took an hour. I have
Mm,
a 2,500 square foot home. It took an hour, hour and a half, and I went through and I prayed softly but aloud, and did this. Everything stopped after that.
right.
So there are doors that can be opened by associations, by objects, by members of your family who aren't really Christians, like my daughter, and then you have to deal with things spiritually. Now this
Mm,
sounds, hocus pocus stuff, but I don't talk about it very often. I really don't, because people just don't know how to handle that.
sure.
But I'm telling you what I've seen. I'm telling you what's happened. And, you guys can deal with it as you want. You can dismiss
Right.
it or what. But
Well,
this
I
is
don't think
serious stuff.
I don't think it's something that a Christian should have too much problems with. I mean, if we over intellectualize stuff and we can rationalize anything away, but as Christians who hold to a consistently Christian worldview, then we want to affirm the reality of the spiritual realm and the reality and power of prayer and its effects upon the spiritual realm. I wouldn't see, I would have difficulty seeing why a Christian would think that's weird. They might not have experienced those things in their own Christian walk, but I mean, these are consistent with a Christian worldview. So, I mean, yeah, I would
Yeah,
imagine that these things would happen to people, and that prayer would have effect on it.
I was in seminary and talking to a guy, and it's my last year, I believe.
Mhm.
And I was telling him what this came up, and I talked about what I'd seen with that materialization of the cross. And he heard me, and he goes, "You never saw it," and he walked off.
Yeah,
And I was just dumbfounded. What? I just told you.
couldn't
It
fit in
was
his
in.
theology.
It didn't fit in his theology.
It was a square peg trying to fit in a circle in
Yeah,
his theological paradigm. Yeah,
right.
that's interesting. Well, thank you for this, man. Let's go through some questions. There's some good questions here. If you're still down,
Sure.
um, I'm gonna go from bottom up because that's where I see some of these questions. So I'll try to get to as many as possible. So Dylan McPhee asks, can we as Christians cast out demons today?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Thank you for your question. Simple answer, quick and slick. I like it.
But let me talk
Uh,
about it a little bit. Yes,
yeah.
you can, and be careful when you do it, and only address the Lord God when you're doing that, unless there's a physical manifestation right in front of you, and there it is. Then you can address it. You're not praying to it
Right.
at that. You're addressing it. Um, Also, as you go to Matthew 12, roughly 43, it talks about casting out demons. If they leave and they come back and they find the house swept clean and empty, then they will enter in.
Right.
And then the second condition is worse than the previous. So let's just say you're involved, and I can tell you about a demonic encounter I had with a woman. That's another story. It's really kind of vague, but it
Okay.
happened. And you can cast them out, but you got to be careful that don't just do it. Do you want Jesus as your savior? And you watch them; they get upset and things like that, and you got to deal with it. I've never done it, but this is what I've heard, and so you just got to be careful with it. Be careful with it. I'll just say
Right. Hmm. All right. Thank you for that. Another question here is can we bind evil spirits?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
and I I I, I don't talk about a lot of this stuff very often, but it's not an uncommon thing for me to say in my prayers. Lord, I ask that you would bind the evil one from,
Mm,
and I'll ask, and I pray it pretty regularly. And notice I'm not saying Satan, I bind you. I don't talk to him. I say, my Lord, may the Lord. Uh, I ask Jesus in your name, Lord. I come before you. Would you please bind the evil one from, like my eldest daughter, who's so badly involved in filth
mm,
and stuff. And we ask. And I'm going to tell you guys this. You need to understand something. If you want to pray like this and you want to get involved with stuff like this, you better be ready for a battle.
mm.
I'm not joking. It's like when I tell people you want to work with Carm. And you and I have had this conversation before, about working together a little bit here and
Sure.
there. Wish we could hire you, et cetera. But anyway, um, I always warn people, you want to work with Carm? Okay. Are you able? Well, if there's a man, I'll say, does your wife know about this? Is your wife on board? You tell your wife that you may come under spiritual attack. You may get fired from your job. You may get in a car accident. You may get abducted by a herd of UFOs. Who knows? Um, but you better be ready for it, and nothing may happen. I've
Mm,
had people tell me after a couple of weeks, I'm done. I
sure.
just can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
I've had other people say nothing happened.
Yeah.
So I just tell you, this is a spiritual thing. We really are wrestling against flesh and blood. I mean, against spirit powers and principalities of darkness. Ephesians 6:12. This is a real thing, and you can't just let laissez-faire go into this and say, "I'm going to cast out this. I'm going to go do that."
Right.
But you need to know this though. Greater is he that's in you than he that's in the world. I'm not afraid of the demonic realm. I will address it if need be. When I was doing radio here in the Boise area, I got called up and went over to a house where they had an object that they took out of the house because whenever it's in the house, doors open and slam.
Sure.
Voices, footsteps down hallways when all the members are in one room looking down the hallway and they
Mm.
know that there's nobody there, you know, and they're scared to death. And they called me up and I went up through and we prayed to the house. I said, well, take that object and destroy it. So there's lots of stuff. Yeah.
Wow, I could
It's just,
imagine you could talk about that stuff all day. I mean, and it's
yeah.
very interesting because I haven't had lots of supernatural experiences, but the little that I have is very similar to some of the things you just happened to say in passing. So I've had a situation with footsteps. Well, real quick, I mean, if Matt has a monopoly on all the cool stories, I got to tell you my story. I had a weird dream in which I was sleeping, and they were these two kids who happened to go to my church. I don't know why. In the dream, they were sleeping in my house, and they run into my room, and they're scared, and they wake me up, and they lock the door behind me. And I was like, well, what's happening? We turn the lights on. They're like, something's coming, and when they said that, I heard these heavy footsteps on the stairs. It was so heavy that I could actually feel in my chest, this very heavy stomping in this dream. And
Wow.
we were praying. We're like, let's pray. And in the dream, the steps, they started getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And in the dream, I got angry at God because as I was praying and trusting God, the noise just kept coming and my prayer wasn't working to kind of stop this thing. And as I got angry at God, I slammed my hand on the bed and I said, God, why don't you answer me? And in the dream, this is a dream, the ceiling rips open and there's this kind of this whirl, kind of like in a movie, this whirlwind, like tornado sort of thing, and the banging starts getting louder and louder and louder, and eventually the banging wakes me up. I'm waking up and standing up in my bed. And as I'm standing on my foot in my bed, I hear people running all over my house. And like a
While
zombie,
you're awake.
I got up, I turned all the lights on, and I stood in my living room, listening to people running all over my house. And I was probably 20 years old, 21 years old, ran right upstairs and fell asleep with my parents. That's how petrified I was. So,
So you audibly heard footsteps all over.
yes. And in the dark,
Oh,
and as I calmly, like, I'm very rational. I'm like, all right, I need to like turn the lights on and kind of just evaluate what's happening. And so I turn the lights on, and I'm sitting there in the living room with my lights on, hearing this. And I go upstairs because I still lived at home and slept in my parents' room. So you can do with it what you want, right? I mean, it's I
yeah.
when people say when they tell me supernatural stories, I don't believe all of them, but I mean, goodness gracious, it's not impossible. I mean, if we live in a world that is both material and there's a spiritual reality, I mean, like, why not? You know? So yeah, that's
I'm with you. I'm with you on that.
my little story here. Joshua Stanley says, I have a Book of Mormon for apologetic purposes to help in discussions with Mormons so I can reference their scriptures. Do you recommend I pray over it and keep it or get it out of my house?
What I'd recommend is just pray over it. Just say, Lord, thank you for providing this as a means by which I can learn to witness to those lost by its great
Mm,
deception. And I just ask Jesus that you would just bind any demonic activity associated with this false teaching. And I trust you. Not worried, Lord. Thank you. And in
mm,
Jesus' name, that kind of a thing. You can keep it in the house. I got stuff in the garage. I got stuff all over.
mm,
And of course, you look at me, you can say, well, look how it affected him. I mean, but you should be okay. But if you think that, here's the thing. Let's just say weird things are happening in your house, and you take the Book of Mormon, you put it outside, and it stops. Okay, to keep it outside. But
mm.
I got books of Mormons in here, and nothing. You know,
Sure. I have all my Van Til books in here, and then all my occult stuff is in the garage. So just to be safe, just kidding.
good. Yeah, well, my occult stuff is in the garage. I
Yeah.
did take those Wiccan books, and I got rid of them all. I trashed them all.
Yeah.
I did.
I was tempted to read the Satanic Bible the other day because I listened to my books that reads to me, and I'm like, is it worth my time to get a glimpse into what all the fuss is about? I haven't decided if I was going to do it yet, but I want to make sure I approach these things with a sober and clear mind. But a book is a
Exactly.
book, and I know I'm filled with the Spirit, so it's not something that we should be fearful of.
That's right.
But
That's right.
nevertheless, uh, Dylan, just real quick, you don't have to answer this question, Matt, because you did. I'm going to point Dylan to a previous portion of our discussion here where Matt gives us the difference between a cult and the occult. So if you go back and listen to the fuller discussion, I asked that very question and Matt answers it. So you can check that out. That'll be helpful to you. Let's see here. Oh, let's see here. Charlie Spine. I almost married a
Hey,
fortune
Charlie.
teller, but she called it off just before we met.
What was that?
Charlie says, I almost married a fortune teller, but she called it off just before we met.
Charlie is the guy who read me that quote that got me started in apologetics.
That's right. That's right.
Mhm. That's right.
Let's see here. There was a question I wanted to hear your thoughts on. Let's see here. Depend the number. Oh, here we go. So here's a question from Humbled Clay. We've been speaking of demonic things. On the flip side, when something supernatural happens in the physical realm, is that the Holy Spirit, angels, anything along those lines? I mean, it's easy to kind of talk about these creepy stories. I mean, what about angelic interactions and things like that? What are your thoughts there?
Well, the only angel I've encountered is my wife. So that's all I can tell you that I've encountered. Um,
That's
but
good. Maybe she'll listen to this episode and she'll make you a sandwich.
make me a sandwich. That's right, which I got from VeggieTales, incidentally.
Awesome.
Um, but I don't know of any encounters that I've had where I would say was that an angel or not. I can't
Mm,
remember. It's probably happened a few times, but I can't remember. Uh, something about the swap meet. Maybe Charlie remembers.
Mhm.
We've had a few weird things. We did a swap meet together. There was a couple of instances where things didn't quite make sense, but that could be because of the way the light is. Who knows? But we are, are entertaining angels unawares, as the Bible says. So I don't have any real stuff on that. I got more stuff on the bad side where,
Yeah.
where I came from.
Interesting. This is interesting, Matt. Paul Fleischer says, I met a woman who said she was a Christian witch, and there's a group out there who call themselves so. To them, Jesus was a wizard. Is this a is this a thing?
Yeah, it is.
Oh
And
man.
you need to. When I do it, I have encountered them. I'm a Christian who does witchcraft. I said, okay. Well, can you tell me more about that?
Hmm.
Instead of saying you're wrong, you pagan, you're going to hell, can you tell me more about it? I take notes because I'm always here at my monitor, which I have 427. I can take the camera and show you my big setup,
Right.
but I have all this stuff and I'll take notes because I want to witness to them. I need to find out information. So that's what I'll do. And then I'll get to the point of telling them, no, there's no such thing as a Christian witch.
Yeah.
And you need to understand that and stuff.
Pardon for me looking back. As you were talking, I was thinking, while there is every Christian apologist should have this in their library.
Kingdom
Okay.
of the Cult by
Sorry
Walter
for
Martin. I used to go to his Bible study all the time. Charlie and I did.
That's right. I remember you telling me that. That's pretty awesome. But just as there is the kingdom of the cults, I don't know if you know, but there is also the kingdom of the occult,
Hmm.
which was, I think, edited by his daughter and her husband. But it deals more specifically with Satanism and Wicca and these sorts of things that we've been talking about, and UFOs and those sorts of things. So folks might want to check that out. That's a good book. I don't know where my copy is. Let me see. Well, I'm not sure, but check it out. Kingdom of the Occult. Pretty good book. Gives you a nice summary on some of the things we've been discussing. Also, Christopher Wright says, look at the Walter Martin debate with witchcraft and Satanism at the same time. They don't openly disagree with one another. There is you can find on YouTube where Walter Martin is considered the father of cult apologetics. He actually interacts with Satanist and witchcraft on a show, and you can kind of see what apologetics towards those groups look like. Walter Martin was excellent. Highly
Hmm.
recommend his stuff, even though he's been gone from us for quite some time. Anything by Walter Martin is going to be super helpful with respect to the cults and the occult and spiritual warfare. He's got some interesting stories, just like Matt does. Very, very fascinating stuff. So let's see here. We got to go through here. Let me see. Humbled Clay asks, is it Wiccans that gather in the woods? Is gathering in the woods a thing? They do that on purpose? Is that
Yeah.
actually a thing? Okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yep.
That's the Wick.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Is there a reason why they do that? Is that connected to their
No,
emphasis upon like nature and things like that?
that's the reason.
Hmm.
So they want to get in harmony with nature, Mother Nature, Gaia, the goddess of earth, the goddesses of earth, the goddesses of the trees, the goddess of the rocks, the god of the rocks, the god of the trees. It just
Hmm.
depends. And they want to get involved. And so they'll go through ceremonies, dress different ways sometimes, incantations, ceremonies, various things that are related to that particular group.
Hmm.
And they do it out in the forest a lot. Yep.
Yeah.
Out in nature.
Interesting. That was a nice question here. Humbled Clay says, why are Eli Ayala and Matt Slick such good teachers? That might be a joke question, but I think that's a good question to answer so that folks who want to be good teachers, if you think we're good teachers and good communicators, what sort of things prepared you, Matt, specifically to communicate the truths of the gospel and to teach theology in such a easy to follow way? Maybe that can
Oh,
give some
easy.
encouragement to people who want to kind of get into these sorts of things.
Sure, easy. Failures. I've made so many mistakes. I've blown it so many times and kept going. So if you want to teach, you need to understand what it is you say, understand your theology, and give it a go. And you're going to make mistakes.
Hmm.
And that's not to knock anybody. Hey, you're going to mess up.
Sure.
Learn from your mistakes and just keep going. And I recommend you develop an outline, which I've shown Eli about. develop outlines, and it's the way to get your thoughts logically connected. But
Mm,
one of the things that's also very helpful to make a good teacher is someone who has to test what he knows with unbelievers. And so debating with unbelievers, arguing with them, I don't mean arguing, yelling, arguing back and forth
right.
politely. That's what I mean. By doing that, um, you polish what you believe. And
Mm,
let me just tell you, um, what you're seeing now in me is a lot more polished than I was when I was young. I was gung ho. I was a gunslinger with a Bible, bull in a china shop, and God has tempered me over the years.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
make a lot of mistakes. Hmm.
Oh, I've heard you go, gung ho before.
Oh yeah,
Poor Jehovah's Witness. Hey, so let me ask you, are you a Jehovah's Witness? Uh, are you a Jehovah's Witness? If you don't answer my question, I'm gonna hang up on you. I'm like, oh boy. Yes.
on the radio.
Okay, it's over.
Uh, Radio, I got to be entertaining too, and plus I don't. Plus I got to be careful because I don't want people to start teaching something surreptitiously, trying to use my show to do that. So I got to. I'm a little more precise there. But
Right, right,
yeah,
right. That's awesome.
yeah,
But
okay.
I'm just once I'm like, are you Jehovah's? I'm like, be gentle. All right. Dylan McPhee says, by the way, that question about being a good teacher was a real question. They expressed that was, they honestly wanted to know. For myself, I've been teaching. So I teach middle school students and high school students. So I'm required to simplify things and to navigate those sorts of, young people and things like that. So that's been very helpful. And because of my own questions, the sorts of questions that I ask people come from the past of me asking those very questions. So, it just comes through experience and things like that. So, all right, let's see here. There was a good question here that I wanted to. There's a couple of good questions here. So, Myron asks, "Can experiences with spirits be real or just exaggerated?" Do you think
Yes,
people kind of over exaggerate their experiences or the possibility of experiences and things like that?
of course. People
Yeah.
can they can misinterpret them. They can over exaggerate them. They can be terrified of them. They can underplay them because people are different and varied in so
Mhm.
many ways. You can get all kinds of different responses to stuff.
Sure.
I try and be as accurate as possible, yet also with a little twist of fun and a little, and then
Mhm,
the
mhm.
light moved, you know, and make it entertaining. I did that once at a youth group, and I asked permission from the youth pastor to let me speak on that topic, and he said yes. And I said, "This is what I'm going to do." He gave me full approval. So I had all the youth at the edge of their seat, leaning forward, and it just happened to be that the first couple of rows were all girls. I don't know why, and I'm just going, and then you wouldn't believe what happened next. And they're all of them were like, and I went, "What's that?" And I screamed, and they all screamed and yelled, and it was a lot of fun. But so the idea of listening to people when they say things, yeah, they can exaggerate.
Sure.
That's why you have to ask questions.
Right.
Ask questions. Look for doors. Look for doors. Always ask, well, what are you involved with? What have you been involved with? What are you doing? Always do that.
Mm. All right, thank you for that. Dylan asks a good question. Is it biblical for Christians to bind or cast out spirits of depression or fear or doubt? So, someone could say, I rebuke you, if there's an actual demonic manifestation, but then of course, people will categorize as like the spirit of depression, the spirit of pornography, the spirit of, fear, doubt. Is this a biblical thing to do, or have we got it wrong here?
Good question. I'm not sure how to answer it, to be honest, because I haven't studied it enough to make an absolute, in my opinion, judgment on it. I don't think there might be. The Bible doesn't tell us. There might be demonic forces that are better able to work with depression
Mm.
than an apathy. Of course, I was wondering how the demon of apathy got anything done. I was wondering about that.
I want to tempt somebody, but I'm
Yeah,
kind of
why
lazy right now.
bother? I don't care about it. So,
That was funny,
uh,
man. That was really good. That's good comedic timing there.
I was wondering. I said, go get him. I don't feel like it. So, what I would do is, if I'm dealing with someone who has depression, for example, and I have many times over the years. I mean, this for my fifth decade here. Um, the first thing that I tell people is when I'm training them or influencing them about this, I'll say, look, you have to understand. It could be they have a chemical imbalance. It could be they've been on a medication. It could be they're traumatized. It could be that they've got something from their childhood that they can't see straight, interpret things properly. They might have a allergic reaction. Find out all these things. I'll ask
Mm.
them, how's your sleep been? Have you been exercising? Are you eating sugar? Sugar's a poison, and even though I love it, it can really play with your brain. And so there's all kinds of things. Alcohol. Get all those things out. Well, no, everything's, okay, it looks like something's happening. Well, why are you depressed? Have you been seeing a doctor? Have you this or that? Well, I have. They give me meds, and well, how's it working? Well, it seems to help. Well, okay, maybe that's just a chemical thing.
Sure.
I'm not going to say you have a demon of depression. Let me put my hands on you and cast it out.
Right.
There might be a demonic thing. So what I'll do when I pray for somebody, I'll say, look, 'cause I pray in my ignorance. I say, Lord, if the person is having a chemical reaction, I know we've already gone through this with the person, so they know I'm not judging or mocking.
Sure.
If there's something there, I mean, I have autism, we have our things we're going to deal with. Lord, if this person has this, please provide the right medicine and or doctors and insight to break through this. If, however, Lord, it is a spiritual issue, I ask in the name of Jesus, I ask that you would bind the evil one. And if there's any demonic connection, to break it. And I ask this,
Mm.
and go on. And so I cover both ends because I don't know. I don't have that discernment.
Right.
And if you're a Calvinist, you're not supposed to have charismatic gifts, but I believe that they're still around. I'm an experiential Calvinist. So I believe that people have those gifts and some can better sense them than others and be aware. Not
Mm.
me. I'm just a doofus.
All right. We'll take a few more questions and they'll wrap things up since we're going on an hour and 20 minutes. But thank you so
I'll
much,
stay
guys,
on
for
as
the
long as
questions.
you want. It's okay.
We got to keep it at somewhat of a length that people will come back and watch it again. This has been a really interesting discussion. So hopefully, if folks have found this discussion useful and interesting, be sure to share it. And hopefully it'll be useful for someone. So D Otero says, are aliens demons? Are
Oh
aliens demons?
man. Um, okay. I believe that some manifestations are direct demonic encounters.
Okay.
The spiritual realm can manifest in physical form. The Nephilim of the Old Testament, Genesis 6, were, I believe, the fallen angels that had relations with women and produced offspring. That's what the church taught till the 1500s, and that's what the Jews always taught. Genesis 6:9, it says Noah was perfect in all his generations. In Daniel 2:43, it talks about the Nebuchadnezzar statue, and there's representing times, epics, and feet and the clay is supposed to be present time, was one of the theories, and it says in 243 they will combine with one another in the seed of men,
Mm.
and it that implies that the they is not people. And Jesus says it wasn't days of Noah, so shall it be the days of the coming of the Son of Man. They were eating, they were drinking. That's not the rapture, and two are taken. That's not the rapture.
Sure.
That's the wicked taken. And so I believe that UFOs are demonic, ultimately satanic stuff. I don't believe life can form by chance any place in the universe. I have the mathematics behind that. I could explain that if you guys are interested. I can make it understandable too.
Sure.
And so it's just not going to happen. And so what are they? There are two categories: spiritual only and physical. And the physical can fall in two categories: temporary manifestations or permanent ones. The spiritual ones, even Alexander the Great saw shields of fire in formation moving across the sky with witnesses. There's a demonic something going on with the battle. People, Christians don't get abducted. One Christian woman did. She had to give permission. Um, the aliens teach theology. Jesus is not God. Reincarnation is true. We are all divine. When people cry out to Christ in their abductions, the abductions end. Um, That's the spiritual side. What about the physical? There are actual physical manifestations. I've studied, a lot of people don't know this. I've studied UFOs for a long time
Mm.
and listened to hundreds and hundreds of hours of material on it. I
Mm.
believe hundreds of hours. And
There's an entire chapter on the kingdom of the occult. There's an entire chapter on UFOs, and Walter Martin has some interesting experience and deep research into that area. So, folks might want to check that out.
That's right. He and his associate, I forgot his name, actually photographed a UFO, and it was on the cover of Time magazine or something like that. And it was one of the best photos. But at any rate, so I believe that there are actual physical manifestations and physical beings that are permanently physical, and they're probably Nephilim that are still around.
Hmm,
And there's going to
interesting.
be a coming time of deception. And
Okay.
Christians need to be aware of this, made possible. It sounds weird, but I have some theories that fits all the facts. I've actually talked to a Christian ufologist about it, and
Hmm, interesting. That's
yeah.
very fascinating. Veckel, I think I'm saying it correct. Veckel has a
Veckel,
question.
what is Veckel doing here?
I don't know who that is. So, welcome, Veckel.
Veckel. Oh, I've known Veckel off and on for like, actually, he's a great guy. He has a great laugh. He's got a good sense of humor.
That's
Stupid like
awesome.
mine.
Well, I did see some of his comments. I think he might have thought that I skipped his question. If I skip a question, it's definitely not on purpose. There's a lot of comments, and I'm kind of just scrolling through. So, I do apologize. But Veckel says,
Veckel.
"Isn't it true that the only supernatural experience that Matt had was that people like him?" I didn't even read that one for all the way. There we
This
go.
Veckel. Yeah, Veckel and I would take shots at each other. I really like him. And he's always invited, just like you are, always invited out to my place. We only met once. And he has a great sense of humor. It's
That's a
stupid,
good. That's a
just
good
like
one.
mine. It's,
That is a
huh?
good one.
It is. Oh, yeah. That's why it's
That
great. Yeah.
is a good one.
Yeah.
Uh, Dylan says here, should Christians be concerned about evil spirits that can harm them physically?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah,
Yes, you
that's
should
a.
be concerned.
I've had a question. Someone asked me that question recently. Can demons um physically harm without? Here's a question: can demons physically harm without possessing a
Yes.
host?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
Sure. In my novel, I exemplified this. Kathy, the main character's wife, is driving on a freeway. She's an unbeliever, and demonic forces are sent to kill her.
Hmm.
And so uh, they go to a servant. They call them servants. It's just a guy who doesn't, he's just whatever. And this guy is manipulated to get into cause an accident on the freeway, and she survives it. But demonic forces can do stuff with their servants to influence you
Hmm.
and to affect you.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Interesting. And here's my last question
I
here.
mean, just think of Pelosi, Biden, you know, the
I was
Democrat
wondering how long it would
Gestapo.
take for the politics to get in here.
I believe they're demonically inspired. I do,
Okay. All right.
for real.
Yeah.
They're
Okay. I
pagans.
hear you.
They work evil in our country, and they're selfish.
Matt, you're
And
going to scare all my Democrat listeners away. No, I'm just kidding.
go, I don't care.
I'm
You can
just
take
kidding.
the Democrat crap. I can read about Democrat stuff. I got the history of the Democratic Party. Go to Carmen, look it up. It's an evil organization.
Okay. All right.
It's
Um,
it's evil.
so here's our last question here. And I apologize if I didn't get to any other questions. We do have to cut the. I work. I go to work tomorrow, so I have to cut it short. But
Wimp.
let's see here.
I
So
work all the time.
yeah, you work all the time, but you get to do cool apologetic stuff and deal with the stress-free life of battling the kingdom of the cults and atheists and agnostics, and you always have a very smooth behind the scenes background running of the ministry where everyone's just working in tandem and patting each other on the back. I mean, come on, bro.
It's basically, I just do vacations every day and I only work for 34 minutes a day. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. No, this is, it's whatever, right? Look at your cat got slain in the spirit in the background there.
That's
Oh,
right. We call him Flopper because mentally,
yeah, he's a charismatic cat. He fell in the spirit. All right, James here says, "Can demons possess inanimate objects like dolls?"
yes.
Yes. Okay. And what does that entail? Do they? I mean, I'm joking, but I'm not joking. Is a Chucky situation? I mean, I'm not joking, but a Chucky situation possible? Can a demonic force inhabit an inanimate object like a doll and cause it to move and do things, or is it more of like an influence sort of thing?
Remember the lamp I told you about? There was a connection with that lamp with
Okay.
the house and the people and the family. They got it out of the house. Some objects, for some reasons, can have demonic connections. So back in the day, another story is a guy I knew was working anti-Satanism work,
Okay.
and he was going to meet a guy who's going to give him a wand, and he wanted to get it out of his house.
Mm.
So he's going to give it to my friend. My friend called me up and said, "We're going to meet in an open parking lot at a certain place. I need you to be there 10 minutes early and flash the lights on. When I come this direction, if you see another car coming, flash the lights on, I'll get out." This is the kind of stuff we would do. And he would receive objects because he had to get rid of these objects from people's homes because of connections with them. Were they indwelt, or was it just a connection to it? I don't know, but it would seem as though that is the case, along with poltergeists, which are usually around with children, and objects can move, so there's a physical connection that can happen. Yes, it is.
Interesting. Wow. Well, I suppose we can stay here all night, but I think we've covered a lot, and I think this is super useful for people. I hope people benefited from this discussion. Once again, we do have a pretty decent crowd here. Had some, I think, like 53 people listening now, and I know there'll be some more later. If you haven't liked the video, that's really helpful for me. It's helpful in terms of showing me support and knowing who is or how many people are actually enjoying the discussions, not simply listening in, and it also helps with the algorithm. If you have enjoyed this discussion, be sure to like the video, and once again, share it if you think someone will find it useful. I would like to thank my good friend Matt Slick of carm.org for sharing from his experience and his knowledge. Is there anything you'd like to say on our way to closing this episode here?
Yeah. um, just ask the Lord Jesus to protect you, to guide you. But I have to warn you that for all who do, not the all cults that we're talking about, for
Mm.
all who seek to live godly, you'll be attacked. And just be ready. This stuff is real. Those stupid morons like myself who directly and deliberately got involved. Um, God in His mercy saved me out of it. But you
Mm.
don't have to worry about that. But just remember to pray. There's a spiritual battle
Oh,
going
yeah.
on, and greater is He that's in you than he that's in the world. Just remember that, lean on that, trust that, you'll be fine.
Mm. Well, thank you so much, Matt. And thank you so much, everyone else, for listening in. I really appreciate you guys. And until next time, I'm going to be having the host of the Cultish podcast on soon. I have the date somewhere, but I don't remember. So I'll let you guys know and I'll post it and share it. That if you're not familiar with the podcast, Cultish, it is a podcast associated with Apologia Church where they talk about the cults and various things related to the New Age and Santeria, if you're familiar with that, as well as a really good 2-part series on that topic as well. So you definitely want to check out Cultish, but I'll have the hosts on here, and we're going to be talking about applying presuppositional apologetics to the cults. And we'll talk a little bit about more of what they've experienced in terms of having interviews with people who have come out of the occult, and the occult, and shared their experiences. So I will let folks know when that is going down as soon as I'm able. But until then, guys, thank you so much. That's all for this episode. Take care and God bless. Bye bye.